Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Warwick Podcastle. This time we're back in conversation with the archivists Amanda Williams and Laura Orriss to get an update after their first year of working on the project and to see how they're feeling now that they are really getting to grips with this enormous and wide-ranging collection. So, Amanda, can we kick off with you? Can you remind us what work you were undertaking and what the project involves?
So, as some of you may remember, Laura and I were asked to bring together the Greville of Warwick Castle collection into one integrated online catalogue, drawing a variety of older catalogues into one electronic catalogue, but also we've got to catalogue individual documents along the way that have never been described before. So we've been asked to provide content for social media as part of the project too. So we've been undertaking videos and podcasts as well as various other events.
Wow, so plenty to keep you busy. Laura, what would you say the priorities have been and what are the timescales involved? I seem to remember that there were a number of problems that you were expecting to have to tackle in a fairly short space of time.
Yeah, so the thing to remember about this collection is just how vast it is. So we've actually spent quite a bit of this year just getting to grips, not just with what's in the collection, but also working out where the gaps are in the existing catalogues, so we can really work out where we need to focus our efforts. So, for example, when we first started, we thought we had a full transcription of Harvey Bloom's catalogue, but we actually found rather quickly that the only parts of the catalogue listing documents relating to Warwickshire had been described. And so the other 2/3 had just been typed up as out of county, so that's fairly useless. To remedy this, we've actually enlisted the help of another colleague, Hilary, who's been doing a fantastic job to add in the missing documents into Calm, which is the name of our cataloguing software. I think it's about 6,000 in total that were missing. Bloom wasn't the most accurate worker, so there are some errors that will also need to be fixed. And he also seemed to get bored at times, so sometimes he's just put things like another deed, which is no help to anybody. Sometimes, though, we do get a quick win, which always helps with the progress we make. For example, we managed to rearrange over 1,000 maps into the new catalogue structure in a matter of days. But then at the other end of the scale, some of the boxes have never been listed at all. I've been working on a box of correspondence on and off for about a month now, and I'm still only about halfway through it. So this box is full of letters received by Anne, the 4th Countess, and her daughter Eva. But one problem that we found is most of the focus on the previous cataloguing efforts has actually been on the papers of the Earls, while the papers of many of the women have just been left untouched. And the boxes containing their papers have just been listed by their name and giving no indication about the contents of these letters. So we've now adjusted our focus slightly. So we're concentrating on these boxes now so we can make them accessible for the first time.
Which is a brilliant innovation, really. So overall, would you say, how is it going? And I realise it might be quite difficult to assess this early on, but do you think you're on track?
I think it's difficult to say if we're completely on track as there are still so many unknowns, and a lot of the boxes we've not even opened yet. But it is safe to say that we're a lot further along than we were this time last year. We've definitely got a better handle on the collection now.
Yeah, I would say it feels like an enormous mountain still to climb, but the journey is a very pleasurable one. So I agree, it's difficult to ascertain whether we're on track. Sometimes we're travelling along at a steady pace, and then along comes an obstacle that takes a great deal of time and effort to get over.
And so can you give us a bit more detail about some of the things you have done?
Yes, so in the past year, Amanda's actually set up the new catalogue structure and we've started to populate it with the descriptions in the existing catalogues. So we're bringing all of those different catalogues together into one structure that's actually in line with the other collections that we have here from other landed families. We've also added a fair amount of previously uncatalogued material, and we're now up to 8,556 entries in the new structure so far. So that's pretty good progress considering we aren't actually spending all of our time on the project. So we have to juggle this with all of our other duties. So really, we're only getting to spend a couple of days a week on it.
We've also delivered a number of talks regarding the project and posted several podcastles, which we hope will have been well received. We've really enjoyed doing the research, although this is also very time consuming. And Laura has done a magnificent job of keeping the Wednesday post well fed.
she definitely has been enjoying those Wednesday posts. So could you mention how you're dealing with some of those stumbling blocks that you knew were coming?
Yeah, we knew this collection was massive with a great deal of material catalogued at box level. So what we mean by that is it might say on the outside of the box and in the catalogue description correspondence of, say, Anne, as Laura is doing. But then within that box, there will be hundreds of letters that have not been catalogued to any other level. So we don't know what's in there. Describing them one by one is going to take a lot of time, and Laura has actually started, as she said, to work on that correspondence now. We also knew the old Harvey Bloom catalogue contained errors, as Laura's also mentioned. So I've been checking the documents against his catalogue, and this is really slow going as he concentrated on the early records, so the medieval material, and my Latin isn't great, so it takes time to decipher some of the names and places that he came up with, which I find not always correct. You know, Bloom did sometimes get it wrong, and that isn't to criticise Bloom. He did an absolutely brilliant job, by the way, because you've got to consider just how much he did catalogue, and he didn't have the access to resources that we have. You know, all the online things that I can pick up on have really helped me with a lot of what I've been doing. We also quickly became aware that Bloom either brushed over certain documents and didn't give any detail, again, as Laura mentioned earlier. I think it might be partly to do with Bloom, it might be partly to do with when we sent material to be digitised for the A2A project many years ago. So records have been grouped under one heading, and all of that has to be expanded and catalogued to individual item level.
Lovely. So that was those were mires that you expected to be heading into, but
yeah.
What about any unforeseen issues that have cropped up? Is there anything that surprised you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I had expected it to be a fairly simple task to transfer the old electronic catalogue, which was the A2A catalogue, into the new structure. I mean, there's more to it than the A2A, but that's part of it. And I'd estimated it would take us about 6 months, but in fact, we're still working on it and we haven't completed it yet for a variety of reasons. Some of Bloom's descriptions are too vague, so we can't place it into the new structure in the right area until we know more about the actual document and its content. So we need to look at the original documents. So what looked like hundreds of documents has turned into thousands of documents, even in the electronic format of the old style. And, you know, that's a huge amount of work of cross-referencing of catalogues and documents.
Wow. So you're really getting into the nitty-gritty of this now. You're probably getting more into this collection than anyone has for a while now, particularly these uncatalogued parts. So have you encountered any interesting documents or anything you weren't expecting to find? Any treasures that have got you excited?
Well, there's a letter in the box that I'm currently working on. So it's a letter from Eva Greville. She was later called Eva Dugdale, which she sent to her mother Anne in 1894 from Richmond Park. She was there present at the birth of Princess Mary of Teck's first child, which was a boy who grew up to later become Edward VIII. Eva was a lady-in-waiting and close friend of Mary, who at the time was Duchess of York, and eventually became the Queen in 1910. So the letter describes how when the baby was born, everyone was presented with a glass of champagne to toast his health. And she then goes on to say about how every time someone new walked into the room, they were required to toast again. So by the end of the day, she says she must have had about 10 glasses of champagne and that everyone got rather vague, which I actually love as a polite way to say that they were all a bit drunk.
That's gorgeous. How about you, Amanda?
Well, as you know, probably from what I've been saying, I love the medieval document. And while sometimes the reason behind the document's a bit dull, the information you can get out of it's quite electric. I'm coming across some big names like de Clinton, de Montfort, although admittedly a wife rather than the actual de Montfort. There's Catesby's, which will, you know, the family will later be connected to the gunpowder plot. And there's a lot of Mallorys, some of them from Bishop's Tatchbrook or connected to Bishop's Tatchbrook. So I think possibly the forebears of Thomas Malory of Morte d'Arthur fame. I have to say, I don't know whether it's ever been proved that Thomas Malory was the Thomas Malory of Bishop's Tatchbrook, but if it is, I think it's a good chance that this is the family. We have a document related to the prioress of Markyat with a rather lovely, albeit broken seal on it of a nun praying. And Markyat's quite a fascinating place because there was a saint called Christina of Markyat. There's a life on her about her, so that if anybody's interested, go and have a look at that. But I also love reading the medieval names for places and fields. I don't know why, somehow the medieval past is more tangible when you're reading those normal everyday things. So in Ulster, they refer to a bleach field. I'm presuming they're bleaching cloth, maybe. And Chipping Dasset had a dog lane, which is a bit dubious, I suppose, in today's connotations. It's also been really satisfying seeing a fair number of deeds by medieval women, with a fabulous array of medieval names from Idania to Clemencia. I also got the opportunity to catalogue the Anthony Eden letters he wrote to his sister Marjorie during World War I. And, you know, I've seen World War I films and read books and poetry. So when I was reading the letters, it all seemed to play out in my head in some sort of shadowy way. The one that sticks in my mind is the one about a dog, which he has feared was killed with a sort of a relation of his through Marjorie, actually. But what they find out is that the dog is still alive. They found it and it's got the collar on and he intends to rescue it. Unfortunately, there's no letter after that to say what actually did happen to the dog.
Oh, so this is all really good stuff. And so it'd be really nice to know that you're keeping people informed and relating your progress to people. So how have you been keeping everyone up to date with the project?
Well, we've been doing weekly social media posts on Facebook and Twitter with the hashtag Warwick Castle Wednesday. So that's mostly just some of the documents we've been finding. And we've also been doing this series of quarterly podcasts. We also did a show and tell yesterday at the Record Office, which was a chance to see some of the wage books in the collection and learn a bit more about them.
And so looking back, what would you say you've learned in this first year? How would you sum things up?
Well, I've definitely learned a lot about the family, specifically in the 1880s and 1890s. Knowing who everyone is and how they're related really is essential when cataloguing the personal correspondence. It's nice because reading the letters sent within the family gives you a real sense of who these people were, so their relationships and their personalities really shine through in their writing. Working out their nicknames for each other has been a bit like doing a puzzle, but it's so worthwhile because you really do get a strong sense of the family dynamic.
Yeah, when I first trained to become an archivist after having studied aspects of medieval history, I always hoped I'd be able to work on something medieval, although I knew the reality was that you tend to catalogue much more recent collections. That said, I still hoped for it, knowing if the opportunity ever arose, my paleographical skills would probably serve me okay, but Latin would be my weakness. So I know how lucky I am to be doing this now, and the paleography is good enough. And slowly I'm getting better at the Latin. I'm seeing bits of medieval Warwickshire and medieval people in a way that brings it more to life, which is totally fascinating. I think to sum things up, our understanding of this incredible collection is growing all the time. And while I have to rein myself in for a couple more years, I can't wait for the public to be able to investigate it in all its glory.
Oh, and that's wonderful. So, and thank you so much for pulling that all together for us and giving us an idea of what it's been like in the past year. But we haven't quite finished with you yet, because I'd like to know what the future holds now. What's next on your agenda for the project?
So I think more of the same for now, but for me there will be a concentration in the near future on correspondence in the collection, hopefully relating to Marjorie, who I did the podcast on, and who I ended up greatly admiring.
I'll be continuing with cataloguing the correspondence received by Anne and Eva, and that may well keep me busy for the rest of the year.
And can we get involved in any way?
So we're hoping to launch a couple of volunteer projects in the very near future. We're almost ready to begin a seals project, where each seal will be documented in detail, cleaned and carefully packaged. And we're hoping to create a digital image library of these too, but that's a little bit still on the back burner. Then we have the wages project, which Laura mentioned about doing a wages show and tell, sort of links to that show and tell. We're waiting on the technology before we're good to go, but we're hoping the start of the project is in sight. This will be more than a useful bit of work. I think it's going to prove to be really interesting. But obviously, in terms of documenting who worked at the castle, that's going to be so good for us because we get so many inquiries about it.
Wonderful. So with the wages project, you are going to be getting people to transcribe the wages books?
Yeah, so what we're hoping to do is we've already got a lot of the records digitised and ready to go. And then for people that are interested, we're going to hopefully sign them up, send out digital images and get them to transcribe and add detail to, well, to transcribe them, but certainly to pull out certain bits of information and add to a database so we can document, you know, the people that are working there at the time they're working there, whether it tells us what they're doing, whether it tells us what they're being paid, any interesting bits of information, really.
Marvellous. And you mentioned that you've done talks and events already. Will there be any more of those next year?
Yeah, certainly more will come. I don't think we've got anything completely in the making as yet, so just watch this space.
Marvellous. Okay, Laura, Amanda, thank you very much for taking time away from these amazing records to come and talk to us today, and good luck for the next year of work.
Thank you.
Thank you.